Namaste. This is a question answer session. So, uh, while we wait for questions to come, just a couple of words about the moment of silence, which Sweta just mentioned. These moments of silence are given to us, actually, even in between breath, in between heartbeats, in the flowing of the current through the synapses in the brain. There are pauses, and we experience everything as continuous. It's just like in a cinema, you have the picture running, and it looks continuous, but there is also filling of the gaps with silence. And I think it's very important to snatch those moments wherever we are.
Yes,
Yeah, in our
okay, start here.
hello. Yes. So, in these moments of silence, we can enter into deeper and higher states, draw energy, consciousness, force, light, peace from worlds beyond our reckoning. And so, it's important to snatch those moments deliberately. Even in work, we have time, maybe a few moments, few minutes. We often just let this time slip by. We get into either chit chat or coffee table discussions. It's very important that time to just stay quiet inside, inwardly, and open ourselves to the source of infinite energy above us. We lose every day countless moments in which we can just quietly plunge within us, stay quiet, stay still, and open ourselves to something much greater which surrounds us, is beyond us, is above, within, below, everywhere. So that was about the moment of silence, and now about some questions. So, moment of silence is not a formality, it's a way of life. Now, the Gita adds to it that during the moment of silence, we should remember and offer our being to the divine. Now, if we can do it, wonderful, but not all are blessed with a faith in the divine. But at least this much we all understand, both scientifically and logically, that there is something which we can call as a greater consciousness, a vaster consciousness, or just a consciousness which is amazing, amazing in its complexity and its vastness. Maybe the source, doesn't matter what we call it. Yoga is not about calling a particular name to the ultimate source. Different people call it differently, in different cultures, religions, even in different sects within yoga paths. But there is a source and origin, and since everything has come from that source, it is there within us also. It's within each atom of existence, but it is given to man to consciously connect with that source. While it is there within everything, but man has the unique privilege to connect with it. And this is a unique privilege we must exercise. It's a birthright being born to a human body. And if we miss on it, it's like, someone left infinite treasure in our name, and we were too lazy to search for it. We preferred the begging bowl and going from door to door asking for doles. So, this is, if there is a tragedy, this is the tragedy that being in a human body, given this possibility of connecting to the very source of all life, of creation, of creator, if you want to put it that way, and yet missing this wonderful opportunity. Now, this connection of the individual unit we call as ourselves with the cosmic and the transcendent reality we call as God is what is yoga. And there can be no better way to face all the challenges of life, to wash away, not just washing away depression, that's a negative thing, but to fill ourselves with the breath of infinite delight. There is no better way. All else is a distraction. Go here, go there, busy yourself with window shopping, eat some good food. All this is okay, but ultimately it is by connecting ourselves to the source that we can get the delight that we want to experience, that we are actually seeking, though unconsciously, and because our faith is limited, so we think we can get it only through something very outer. And when we don't get it, we suffer, we get frustrated. Well, it was never meant to, be gotten from outside, except in very limited and very mixed up amounts, mixed quality. We don't get that pure stuff anywhere, no shop. We have to go shopping inside, but the price is too exacting. If we go shopping for delight, it asks for only one thing: give me your false identities, and I'll give you the true one. That is what is called a sacrifice in yoga, to give up all these false identities we carry on our what is it called, visiting card, and God knows what, and feel puffed up about. We offer it, and we offer a littleness and smallness and ego. That's the most important. Ego personality to which we are attached, name, surname, which becomes a photo frame, which our grandchildren conveniently forget. So that's not life about. So life is about this infinite delight, infinite consciousness, infinite beauty, infinite love, infinite wisdom. And the way to become one with that is yoga. So I think this is enough as a background. Otherwise, I'm putting a break on the inspiration. And any questions? Let's have some questions. Yes.
So there's a lot of things we are reading nowadays, especially the messages we get from social media about today's this special Grahan and whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
People doing
Okay.
different things from
Yeah, yeah. So,
Does commentary on this?
so the Grahan and the today there is a Surya Grahan, and has mother said something about it. So you see things like Grahan and the cosmic movement of stars and the subtle bodies. Actually, all physical phenomena has its is a representative symbol of something more subtle and occult. So, occult point of view, one can understand that the sun is the source of all light, all consciousness, and if something crosses its path, stands in its way, it's symbolic of like a shadow standing between us and the Lord. So symbolically, but all this still belongs to the lower hemisphere. And the mother wants to take us to the higher hemisphere, to that realm where there is no Grahan at all. The deathless light, the shadowless truth, the everlasting day. So she speaks about the essentially about the spiritual journey, and in fact, all the great masters, what their name, who speak about union with the divine. I'm not speaking of those foraying into the occult and all that, which is of course something more than what human consciousness experiences. But if we take yoga as a union with the divine, then it's the ultimate power. What can stand in the way of our union? So we have to look at it like this. It depends a lot on our faith. If we have faith in these things, that eating a particular food, or of course looking at the sun directly is not advisable. That's medically not advisable. Some of these things may have come up subsequently because of purely medical reasons. People wanted to have a look, they lost their eye, and then human nature is such that it begins to observe things, that okay, on this particular day animals were behaving crazily. Well, animals will behave crazily because it's something unusual, and they tune themselves to the cosmic rhythms. Even for human nature, if you notice that we have a biological clock ticking inside, which is managed by the light and dark cycle, night and day and night cycle. So this biological clock also takes a hit. So which means our internal biological rhythms in some way definitely get affected. The hormonal secretions, the endocrine system, everything depends on that. Now it's not that it has been studied in detail to prove something authentically, scientifically, because that's not how the scientists would look at it. But it's understandable that phenomena like that are bound to impact earthly life because of our connection with the rhythms. I'm talking of a purely material way. We wake up, we sleep at night, wake up in the morning, we wake up with the little bit sun coming up. So all that is fine, but it's not that important now. To that many things get added up. Like don't do this, take a bath before, eat very early and then eat after 2 o'clock. Like, in certain other cultures, you have eat before sunrise and then after sunset. All these things, then we put so much belief in this that become like a collective suggestion that becomes a problem, because now if everybody believes that something is going to happen, then if you don't believe, but deep inside there is that fear. It's like the virus which has become omnipresent now. Oh, what if I am attacked? Now this is enough to open the door. So it's a collective suggestion. So there is a symbolic phenomena, there is an occult play of forces, there is a material aspect of it, and there are collective suggestions masked with a heap of practices which may have originated with some logic at some point of time, but have now stuck on to our outer consciousness as if they are, ineluctable truths. Now all this mask creates a heavy consciousness in the mind. And it's not healthy. Frankly, we should have a very healthy approach towards life and all these things. Whatever be the movement of the stars, the soul in man is greater than his fate. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing, none of the cosmic forces can stand before the light of the original sun, the divine consciousness. Isn't it there in all our Puranas? Even when that consciousness takes a human form like Lord Rama, Ravana, who had mastered all these celestial forces, all the Navagraha were his, menials, they would obey his command. That's what it means, that he had captured them, means now he could capture those subtle forces that weave the thread of destiny. He had done that. That's what it means, not the way it is portrayed, ki pakad ke, you tie them in a prison. But it means that he had mastered these forces. He was a yogi of a certain kind. What Sri Aurobindo calls as the infra-rational mystic, like Hitler. So they go for powers, occult powers, and they get it. But even before the embodied divine, he couldn't stand. Leave aside the ultimate power in its original effulgence. Rama is the divine, but he has limited himself to a sattvic illumined mind. And yet, so those of us who are so fortunate to have faith in the divine, and those who are doubly fortunate to have the embodied divine in whom they can put their faith. I use the word fortunate because it is indeed a rare grace to have faith in the divine. All these things have no meaning at all. But yes, for those who believe in it, it's perfectly fine to, but where is the end of all these, becoming a slave of all these forces? Man is born to be free. And we must live our life as free beings, not as, slaves. We are not meant to be that. Now, symbolically, since you mentioned, it's very interesting. I mean, there are interesting aspects to it. For example, Surya Grahan. So, there is the sun and there is the shadow. Now, if you identified with the shadow, then yes, you are miserable. If you are identified with the sun, there is no shadow. So, it's interesting that today I see humanity in two parts. One which is identified with the shadow called fear, death. Death has become such a huge reality in everybody's life. It's not healthy. But if you identify with it, surely the shadow falls on you. But equally, we can be identified with the sun, the ancient mantra, the greatest that one can ever have from yogic point of view, a mantra of one single word, or two, Aham Brahmasmi. I am the deathless, ageless one. Now, if we could collectively wake up to that consciousness and trust that, nothing will come. But it's so difficult because human nature wants to fall back. The so-called reality and the phenomena, so-called phenomena which we believe to be real, much more real than the real truth. So we have the sun and the shadow, depends on what we identify ourselves with. Then of course this day is the longest day, and for those who know about Mother and Sri Aurobindo, of course, they must be aware that this is the day when Sri Aurobindo had announced the launching of the Arya. The first issue came out on 15th August 1914, but the launching was announced on 21st June 1914. Now, I find it very interesting, again, like the Surya Grahan. See, during 1914 to 1919, the world was engulfed in a deadly war, and of course, followed by the Spanish flu. What was Sri Aurobindo doing then? Not doing some Havan and Yagya to, keep away the war. Of course, he had his inner spiritual power, but he was invoking the sun all through the Arya. It is light, 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 endless light. So instead of being mesmerized by darkness, let's invoke the sun. That is something we can always do. And if there is darkness, we must do it with even greater intensity. If there is at all a responsibility, it is this, to invoke the light of the sun. Vedic rishis, there are richas where they speak of long nights. So based on this, Sri Lokman Tilak had this theory about the Aryan migration. Mind you, this is different from Aryan invasion. Aryan invasion never took place. This is now proved beyond doubt. But migration, humanity was migrating into, probably from a previous cycle. The previous cycle was in the Arctic belt. Then the Ice Age came and people migrated. The story of Manu and. So during this migration in the Arctic Circle, they must have experienced. Now Sri Aurobindo says this is possible, that they may have experienced long nights, because in Arctic Circle you see long, long night, 6 months or 9 months of night. So it's quite likely. But the beauty is that during that time, they are invoking the sun. They are lighting the fire. So fire of aspiration must be lit higher. And behind all these customs, sometimes that, do this puja, that puja. Basically, our puja is to light the fire of aspiration and to invoke the sun. So even this becomes an opportunity. When, the shadow will see that my presence is only intensifying the aspiration, then it will say that my plan has failed. So let's deliberately, consciously fail the plannings of the shadow. Yeah? Okay. So, any other question?
Yes. This is Kaustubh from Melbourne.
Okay, yes, Kaustubh. Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
I don't know how to bring this up, Alok bhai.
Yeah, please.
A crucial point in my life. I just lost my mother 2 weeks back due to brain stroke in India.
Uh-huh.
And I could not fly to India because of COVID outbreak.
Yes.
And, though I worship Mother and Sri Aurobindo, it's very painful in the heart, and just thought of, asking you what exactly I should do.
So, yes, it's a good question, which I am sure quite a few people must be experiencing, with either their parents or near and dear ones being away from them, and though they feel so deeply, which is understandable, they cannot be with them. So, I would suggest, first I'll narrate an incident when there was somebody living in the ashram context, and the mother was very ill. His physical mother was very ill, and he asked the Divine Mother for guidance. Mother said, "You can do a lot more for her by being here and praying and connecting to the divine." You see, this world is interconnected. It's not just the physical presence. Yes, there are physical things where physical presence is required. We need people to, physically help, and if that can be arranged in some way, that is wonderful. But there are other levels of togetherness which fortunately don't need us to take a flight. And so first thing we should do is to send every day, morning, evening, our thoughts, our prayers, our love, our gratitude, and trust me, they will reach. Even though she may not outwardly, in her outer consciousness, understand it, but it's going to nourish her, nurture her. She may not ever realize that, or maybe she will, because, parents are very sensitive to things which are coming from the children. But they will understand. And of course, now there is Skype and everything through which even materially there could be. So stay in touch in both inner ways and outer ways. And it's not so much that one is physically present. Even a few moments, actually there are now neurological studies where they say that when you go and see a patient for 5 minutes in an ICU setting, now this translated into 5 minutes of Skype call. Now, there are actual studies that you just smile and throw some positive thoughts and come back. Now, these thoughts run like a record in the brain for many hours. It is, there's an interesting word for it, mirroring. There are actual mirror neurons identified in the brain. Now, look at it now the other way, that if we are pained and if we are unhappy, then that's also not a good thing, because maybe when we talk to our parents, first of all, even when we don't speak, we are sending this pain towards them unwittingly, of course. And when we speak to them, it will come up. Imagine, if we just mention, I'm saying in general, anyone, that, I am so pained and I am so unhappy that I am away. I wish I could be there. Now, this is going to compound the state in which the parents are. It will be something like a misplaced sympathy. So it may be gratifying to the ego for the moment that, oh, my son or my loved one feels like this for me, but it gratifies the ego but does not nourish the soul. So instead of that, it's much better to, send the thoughts of love. And when we speak to them, though we may miss and our hearts may weep, don't let the weeping reach them, but the smile that we experience when we meet them, see them, and stay in touch with them. So this is very important, because otherwise our inner state affects us and all those whom we love and cherish. So this is what I would suggest. And above all, most importantly, remember them in your prayers, offer their being to the divine, pray for them. And I think this is the best help that one can ever give, because divine is everywhere. He can reach anywhere and everywhere in whatever way, countless ways, through countless hands. And I have so many stories, actual, not book read stories, but actual, where I have seen that this kind of prayer has reached and has helped. I mean, of course, there would be a process, and sometimes when we see the process, we just end up saying it's natural. But behind the natural, there is the supernatural, which also stands. I'll give you an example. When during my Air Force days, and I'm the only son. I have a sister, but my father had stroke. And I got a message. Now, this is somewhere mid-90s. That time when I went for an urgent leave, there was a whole team coming to this institute, which was, of course, a very special institute where I was posted. And leave was denied. I knew it will be denied, but still I asked. And, now what to do? Now look at soldiers, they are on border. So what to do? So I just prayed. That's the only thing I could do. And of course spoke to my father. All this Skype business was not there. Landline also through somebody else. So it was to my mother that I spoke. We didn't have a phone at home. So the neighbor's phone, and my mother is conveying the message. And my father, with his faith in Lord Rama, he had such a beautiful experience, and he recovered with it. Everything recovered completely. Now, strokes can recover. There is something called as a transient ischemic attack. But as Sri Aurobindo puts it, I prayed, and I have equally a valid right scientifically to believe that my prayer helped. There are studies where it is shown that prayers help, collective prayers help, individual prayers help. So prayer is something which we miss out badly in our life. Of course, we all pray, but it's largely a mechanical prayer, largely a prayer from the book which we have read. But it should well up from the heart, from the core of our being. That's a prayer. The divine must be getting bored hearing all those, oh, hail thou Almighty. And that's not what is prayer. Sometimes that is drama. And he doesn't like it. We should pray as we would approach him. Imagine the divine right, I keep saying this, divine right in front of you. Are we going to really narrate a prayer from whatever, Sanskrit, English or whatever, and with all those intonations, he will say, okay, now get back to the real stuff. Or rather we fall at his feet and say, Trahimam, take me, help me. Mother used to have a whole list of prayers which she speaks about, and she said for many years the only two-word mantra which would instantly connect her was, Oh Lord. That was enough for the Lord to be there. So we have the story of Prahlad, so wonderful. So prayer invocation of the divine. And the best part is, even I think yesterday I was mentioning, even if one leaves the body for whatever reasons, time has come, or 100 other reasons, in such situations, what a beautiful way to be surrounded by all the prayers. Those who have an occult vision can see these prayers. Literally. Now imagine, if one has to leave the body surrounded by all these swan-like beings who have come to take, because some people have prayed for you. Rather than all those, horrible-looking yamdutas with all those, God knows, buffaloes and horns, crude imagination of people. But much better this way. So pray. Pray, and whoever loves them, pray together. Keep a time when you and they can connect together in a common prayer. Keep a time when you can pray together. And I think that'll be wonderful. It'll bring you a greater intimacy at that level, a much greater intimacy than what we can ever physically achieve. Because I've seen that when people are physically together, they end up fighting. But when they are a little separated, they end up loving, because the edges of the ego are not rubbing and the core can come out. So let this core come out and connect with not only parents, I would say, with the whole world from the core rather than the surface. Because the surface invariably brings the play of ego, pain, much unwanted suffering. Right? Yes.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you. Can someone write these questions? One or two? Yeah, but better for easy. So, any other question?
Namaste, Alokta.
Namaste, namaste.
I have a question. If a person is naturally inclined towards depression, or if they have inherited biology of depression, can it be really cured? Or what can we do to help them?
Okay, this is a very practical question. And I'd missed this out yesterday because we didn't talk about clinical depression or biological depression as it is called. And thanks for bringing it up. So yes, biological depression, meaning thereby there is a heredity factor. I won't use the word natural, because there is nothing which can be regarded as a fixed natural. Nature itself works according to habits and patterns. Heredity itself is that. So essentially, the root of the problem is that can we change what we have inherited? And from the standpoint of yoga, we can. Definitely we can. Not only change it, override it, but change it completely. Now I don't want to go into the technical details of all these studies, but there is a very interesting, just to give you one small little hint from the genetic point of view, there is a messenger which connects the cells, our very cells. It attaches to the cell walls, then enters inside. See how is the decoding taking place inside the nucleus, and how are all the messages reaching the cell from one place to another. So there is a messenger which is called as tRNA and mRNA, which actually come and tag on and pass on the message. Now this is a process which happens at a very microscopic subconscious level, but this messenger can definitely be guided by your thoughts. In fact, in one of the places, the mother says that the purpose of thought is to mediate between the grace and the substrate or the material medium. So definitely it can be done. At the same time, we must understand it's not like a wishful thinking. It's not like, people say, okay, whatever you wish, that will happen. It will happen. But the more a problem is rooted in the body, the greater time it takes. So perseverance has to be tremendous. So one can completely come out of depression for sure. I'm not talking of psychotic phenomena, which is a different thing. Since this question is specific about biological depression, yes, definitely, but it needs that kind of faith, aspiration, persistent effort, which should not be directed towards getting rid of depression as much as towards growing towards health. See, they are two different things slightly. It may sound subtle, but by saying that I want to get rid of depression, I am indirectly reinforcing it, Instead of that, it's like I want to practice yoga to get rid of illness. How about practicing yoga for the sake of health? Even those who are not depressed are not healthy. sometimes very difficult to say which is a better fate, because depression or psychological crisis gives us an opportunity to reflect and grow, whereas those who are not going through it are very happy and comfortable in their little cocoon. And I'm telling all this very responsibly as a practicing psychiatrist for the last how many 3 decades. So I have seen number of patients, and I've seen that there are people who just come out because they have the faith, perseverance, and they understand this, that I have to grow towards a greater and greater harmony. Now, this subtle difference we must understand. Getting rid of depression is like I want to go back to my status quo. And that's what even psychiatrists do through medication. What do? They put you back into your status quo situation. But to use depression and, in fact, any crisis as a means for growth. Now that's what is important. So instead of going back to status quo, I want to get rid of depression, I want to be, some people say I want to be what I was earlier. No. If this dark door has come, like Alice in Wonderland, let's enter into a magical space. So instead of that, we should aspire and pray for progress. Now you see, a lot of depression is because we are not progressing in life. And of course, outwardly we may be progressing in people's eye, but we are not leading our true life. We have deviated from this truth of our own existence. And then, because of societal pressures, reasons, 100 things, real and unreal, we are hypnotized and we lead a life which is not our own. So there is a chronic undercurrent of depression, and it applies even in what we are calling as biological depression, because we don't know whether biology has stopped and where environment has taken over. Because if there is a biological depression, implying in the parents this tendency is there, so it has come as a strong imprint, like a vertical heredity transmission. So we must disabuse our mind of all these ideas and remember that, remind ourselves 10,000 times, a million times, that well deep within me I am that pure divine essence, that truth which no shadow can cross. So let this be the guiding mantra of our life. Every morning invoke that beautiful sun that shines in all its splendor. Offer gratitude. Open the heart towards all life. Love is a very important factor in getting rid of depression. But, love can be of a clinging, dependent type where we are drawing from people. But love has its own source within. And when we open out to the world, it acts like a magic. To give love increases the force of love within us. So, it definitely 100% I can say with all authenticity that depression can go away, biological depression, by these inner means. But there will be an intermediate period during which one may need medication, and I see nothing wrong in it. I have seen people who are open to the divine, and I have seen that the need of medication and the dosage and the duration is definitely considerably reduced. So one may need medication, it's okay. Nothing wrong in that. But even if one had to need medication for a long time, use this opportunity as a growth. Why put it as either or? That okay, if I am taking medication, I have given up. No. Medication is its own box and has its own place because sometimes it may be good to help the nervous system by purely material means, because at each level we have a corresponding medium through which the force can work. So it's perfectly fine in taking medication. Certainly not very, very strong medication which can, drug us to sleep, but tailor-made dosage individually. But unfortunately, it's very rare because most people use a standard prescription. I have seen people who are subtly oriented need much lesser dosage. So some medication is fine. At the same time, use this as a unique opportunity to grow endlessly. So this is what I would suggest. Again, this is different from psychotic phenomena where there may be actually things like possession and all kinds of influences. That is much, much more difficult. And probably if that happens, one needs some medication to block the molecular gates from the inrush of these forces. But at the same time, one can still continue to progress as long as the psychic being is still taking care of the being. Okay, so this is in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Chalaka.
Yes.
I have another question, if I may.
Yes, please.
Can suicide be considered as Ichhamaran of the modern age.
Suicide is a Utkat karma. All spiritual literature, from the ancient literature to the Isha Upanishad, there's a whole verse. I know it's a controversial verse which different people have interpreted differently, but from what Shobindran, the mother, has spoken of, Asurya nam te loka pretya abhigachanti. Those who leave their body willfully, they to start with, Ikshamrityu itself, but that we can come to a little later. You see, one has cut short violently the curve of life, which means the challenges that one faces are meant for us to grow. So one tries to cut it off violently, number one, as if to escape. Number two, it is done in a very, very dark state of consciousness. So what happens? Our state of consciousness carries us to the further journey. That's what, see, this is the other way, what the Gita puts it as, that, remember me at all times and fight. So whatever is your state of consciousness, you will go towards that. Now, that means if we are in a dark state of consciousness, we will enter the Asurya Nam Te Loka, the dark, sunless worlds of gloom, where we are totally trapped, as it were, for who knows, of course, help will come at some point of time, but in the body we can still call for help. But when we are caught up in that, trapped in that dark state, we don't even know, whom to call, where to reach out. So it is a very, very dark exit. Second, we have tried to cut abruptly the challenges of life. It will come back in a much, much more difficult way each time we try to do it. So it's actually a no option. It's not only a non-starter, but it complicates things endlessly. All spiritual literature mentions it's an Utkat karma, and the Divine Mother also says that 3 lives, the scar or tendency to suicide remains, and it requires a real call and grace to remove it completely. So if one has suicidal thoughts, one should call grace, cling to it, and aspire to pull one out of it. Now, Ikshamrityu is another aspect. Now, Ikshamrityu is of 2 kinds. One is that commonly called Ikshamrityu, like euthanasia, I want to die, and people like in certain traditions, people stop taking food and water and withdraw. Now, this because you are feeling that the body is suffering and all that. This is again not a Ikshamrityu. It's an attempt to escape. It doesn't help. It's not a good thing to do, because again you are trying to cut off a challenge which the divine wisdom has arranged for our growth. But there is another kind of Ikshamrityu, the kind which Bhishma exercised. And I know of a couple of people in the ashram context to exercise it. When your work is over, you know that now, my work is over. Swami Vivekananda. That is Ikshamrityu. Sri Aurobindo, when he says that I'll come back in a new supramental body, because of the work that they are doing, the nature of the work they are doing, they're very conscious that either that by going beyond the limits of the body, as with Sri Aurobindo, we can actually facilitate the work, or because whatever work one had come to do, it is over, like Swami Vivekananda, or like Bhishma, who's, he waited. Imagine a man with Ikshamrityu is not taking, okay, now I am on a bed of arrows, let me go away. Because he had taken the vow of seeing Hastinapur safe, so he can't do that. So he is waiting. Now this is true Ikshamrityu. That is not because one is impelled by suffering. I mean, to be on that battlefield, Bhishma was suffering doubly. To see all the onslaught, to see his near and dear ones die, himself on a bed of pain. But yet, because he knows that so what was he doing during that time? He was aspiring that may my aspiration be fulfilled with or without me. And in fact, without me. So he moves out and he waits the moment, it's fulfilled, he chooses to depart. So Ikshamrityu is a very different thing. It's granted as a grace. Some people have it who are very conscious of their psychic being. But generally what is called as Ikshamrityu is not Ikshamrityu, but another dignified form of escape, which is sanctified by certain religions. That you stop eating, drinking, and you withdraw. There is a term for it, Apyo Vasna or something like that, where you slowly drop these sanskaras because you're not eating. I'm not sure whether it's a good idea. I think it's a bad idea because whatever one has left unfinished, one will come back to do it. That's what the law of rebirth is about. So if you believe in rebirth, then it has no meaning. If we don't believe in rebirth, then too, it makes sense that I must live my life till the divine wants me to live. Even if I can do outwardly nothing like Bhishma, I still can aspire, I still can invoke, I still can, bring hope to countless people. You see, Bhishma was giving knowledge, people were coming to him, seeking solace, and he was there for them. So, that Ikshamrityu is a very rare. Or like Shri Krishna who takes Ikshamrityu, or Lord Rama because his mission is over. Now that's a very different thing altogether. But mostly we must not seek death, we must not be afraid of death. If it comes, we embrace it. Because what is death? Sri Aurobindo writes very beautifully, death is but a changing of our robes to wait in wedding garments at the eternal's gate. So if it comes, fine, chalo. But we should not ask for it. Premature weddings are not good. Let's deserve the meeting in wedding garments. Let's fulfill God's work for which we are born. That should be our only focus. Because actually there is no escape. Some people speak of nirvana as an escape. Well, if God wanted nirvana, there would have been no creation to start with. And second, nirvana doesn't come because we, join a sect, or because we dress a certain way, or we follow outwardly certain codes of conduct. To even arrive at nirvana, which is the only way that a soul can really come out of creation, one has to have the mighty heart of a Buddha which tramples over desires. That kind of stillness inside. To be a Buddha, not to talk about that he's a Buddha, I am an enlightened one, all this talk that goes on the net and Quora and all these forums that I have got enlightenment. Stay away from such stuff. True, Buddha never said, I am an enlightened one. The original Buddha. How he walks trampling over desires below his feet. Mighty. Asking for nothing. His heart burning with an intense aspiration, with compassion for whole mankind. He was not seeking individual nirvana, by the way. He was wanting to find a way out of the suffering of this world because he was moved by the suffering of creation. Not an individual escape. So if we have the heart of a Buddha and the intellect of a Buddha, tremendous intellect. If ever there was any intellect which could compare with Shankara's, and of course I am not bringing Sri Aurobindo in beyond comparison. It's Buddha and Shankara, two mightiest intellect ever born in India. Again, I am not bringing Sri Aurobindo in because it's not just intellect but goes far beyond any limits. And if we have that, yes, we can ask for nirvana, try for it. That's the only ticket that takes us beyond, not death. Death is a gate to the false infinite. How much ever it may tempt us, we should not make it real in our consciousness. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So we have just about couple of minutes. Any one quick question maybe I can take. Yeah. All right. So, okay, fine. So one last question. Yes, tell me.
How would we know that we are entering into the phase of depression? And if we say that it's the inner being will tell you that we are in depression. Unhappy.
Good question. How do we know that we are going into depression? We'll feel it, just like we feel joy. But the first sign is not feeling joy. There are people who are built in a certain way that they don't. Also because there is, society unfortunately, if you are depressed, now it's looked down upon. So many people don't even express it. They even deny to themselves that I am depressed. But you will feel that there is a missing of joy. Now, when there is a missing of joy, there are other things which follow. Irritability. Again, I'm not saying that every time one is irritable or angry, and also please don't start categorizing people. Oh, you are very irritable, you need to see a psychiatrist. No, by all means. Irritability, anger are unfortunately the stuff of human nature. They should not be. But yes, anger, irritability, lack of feeling joy, they are those early signs. excessive anger. In fact, depression is anger turned inwards. Anger is turned outside. The same energy turned towards oneself is depression. It's acute egoism when thoughts come like, nobody loves me, nobody cares for me, nobody understands me. What is common is me and nobody. So there is me and there is nobody. That's why depression is an egoistic illness. Okay, if nobody cares for you, you care for people. You can always care. Why not? Maybe when we care for this world will care for us more. But why do we need the world to care for us? I mean, we should be strong enough and not depend on anyone for, needing care. But even if that is not the state, at least we can start the ball rolling from our side to care. And then, yes, people give care ordinarily at human level. Sometimes we receive it, whatever it is. But the common thought that if these thoughts come, life is meaningless, worthless, self-depreciation. It's a state of tamas. I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm no good. Why? Because somebody X, Y or Z thinks I am worthless. What is the worth of that person having such thoughts about me? Who is he or she to decide whether I am worthless or worthy? If the other person says I am worthy, does it make me worthy? I mean, it doesn't. Isn't it? So if the other person says that I am worthless, why should I give credence to that? Is the person living in truth consciousness that, I take his or her views seriously? So, but these thoughts will come. They will start entering, especially at night, because night is a time when all these forces are freely at play. Also, we are tired. So, they find easy entry. Then on top of it, we put those old-time Mukesh ke gaane. And, he is a good singer. I like him. But, some of those songs, I don't remember now any of them. But whatever it is, very sad melodies. As if we want to compound it, hear some happy songs of Kishore Kumar if you want. if that is the choice. Otherwise, put some nice, so many things which can distract this state. So don't get caught up in this state and start flowing with it. So important thing is to use antidotes to, each such suggestion that I am useless, say that I am a child of immortality, I am child of the Divine Mother, I am child of delight, I cannot fail, Amritasya putraha, Anandasya putraha. I am mother's child. Let the whole world say whatever about me. The whole world may say he is the most useless fellow and most stupid fellow and whatever. Smile at it, She was... Vahana, Nandi, how much he heard from everybody. How much ulahna. People used to say, oh, this stupid bull-minded fellow. But Nandi had no reaction because Nandi said, okay, I may be stupid or whatever, but I am Shiva's Nandi, try becoming one. Same we see with Hanuman. How much he heard. You see, when you read that episode of Lanka Dahan, what he doesn't hear from Ravana and all his people in the place, oh, he's monkey. Monkey-headed, monkey-brained. But where is Ravana and where is Hanuman? So, a lot depends on what we value in life. Stop valuing social opinions and you'll be a free person. Discover your own truth. So when these suggestions come, know that waves of depression are coming. Sometimes they may not attack the thought, but just like waves, for no reason. Rise above them or distract your mind to something else or call in counter waves of peace and harmony and light and joy into the being, but definitely turn away from, step back, learn to step back when these waves come and they will pass away. If you don't flow with it, it will increase and then go away. Everything in life moves like that. So these are early signs. The sign that when we really need to see someone probably is when our sleep starts getting disturbed. Now that becomes like, matter is getting a little serious. So when sleep starts getting disturbed, not in an absolute way, but this is one of the criteria, then probably some medication may be needed. So be watchful over that. Now again, one day sleep getting disturbed has no meaning. 3-4 days in a week, then there is definitely things are a little more serious. Okay? So the earliest sign is lack of joy. Joy is given to all of us from childhood. It's one thing which is already given. But as we grow up, parents make us believe, no, no, you are not happy till you get a degree, and teachers make us believe you are not happy, you are not supposed to be happy if you don't get good marks. Society makes us believe that you are not supposed to be happy unless you get a good job. So we start believing, oh, maybe I am not happy, I am not supposed to be happy. Whereas it is our nature to be happy. See children, how they are happy. Until we corrupt their original file and say, look, you must get what your neighbor's child is getting, then only you have a right to be happy. Happiness is our birthright. And don't give away birthright. Like ascent to the divine life is our birthright. These are birthright and we should not barter it for anything. Okay, so thank you so much. Serve this world, wonderful world of the divine. 2 lines from Savitri. Few lines with which we can close. They are from this canto, wonderful canto, book 1, canto 4, The Secret Knowledge. We all think of, oh, I have made this mistake, this problem. So these are magnificent lines. One who has made this world is ever its Lord. Our errors are his steps upon the way. He works through the fierce vicissitudes of our lives. He works through the hard breath of battle and toil. He works through our sins, our sorrows, and our tears. So see, me is not at the center. He is at the center. He works through our sins, our sorrows, and our tears. Whatever our present ills, whatever the appearances we must bear, whatever our strong ills and present fate, when nothing we can see but drift and bail, a mighty guidance leads us still through all. And then he closes with these magnificent lines. Of course, continues, long passage. After we have served this great divided world, God's bliss and oneness are our inborn right. A date is fixed in the calendar of the unknown, an anniversary of our birth sublime. Our soul shall justify its checkered walk. All shall come near that now is not or far. So let our eyes be fixed on this far goal, even if it is unseen, and life will grow beautiful and delightful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, we'll close. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alok.
Thank you. Yeah.